most men, like I work with these football players, the whole football team, there's like 90 of them. And we do boat pose and they're shaking like a leaf. And I'm like, you guys can bench 300 pounds, but you can't do boat pose? Like what? So that is like huge. That to me is the first and foremost. Strengthen your core, go start at the core center and then move out.
Welcome to Guys Talking Yoga, a podcast created to help inspire men to consider the practice of yoga by sharing the stories and paths of other guys. I'm your host, Derek Vanderwalker. In today's conversation, we got a special guest, Casey McBride, who has been a longtime teacher and practitioner over the last 20 years, bringing yoga to the Fairfield County community in Southern Connecticut. But for the last 8, specifically really focusing on bringing yoga to men, not just guys, old guys like us, but younger guys, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college athletes. She really has developed an expertise in working with that segment of the community. Anyhow, I think Casey's fantastic. She's a friend, and she's got some great perspective on guys with egos, learning to humble themselves and kind of get into the practice, being consistent, working with props, learning to use modifications, and then also talking a lot about injuries, how to avoid them, how to recover from them, and then lastly, talking about working with a unique younger community, developing a real expertise. Anyhow, thanks for listening. I know you enjoy it.
So I was a dance teacher my whole life. So that came naturally to me since the age of 13 through high school, college. Post-college, I'd always taught dance classes. Not to men, maybe there's a couple one-off boys, but generally girls. So then I was a professional dancer in New York City. I had a knee injury. I quickly quit that life, moved to California, started working in the corporate world. Didn't really love the vibe there. Came back to New York City. I missed that pace of life. And I was working at a company called TechSpace, which is currently like the WeWork of today. So it was a little incubator of all these cool .com companies. And one of the services is they had this awesome yoga teacher named Jean Kerner. And she would come every Wednesday night and would teach a yoga class. Well, I was the only one that would go. So I basically got an amazing weekly private every week. And I'm like, this is awesome. So at the time, I think it was 1997, 1998 maybe. The .com market just completely crashed. And my job, I was a recruiter bringing in people into a tech space. So my job swiftly transitioned from bringing people in to then, oh, what else can you do? Can you do marketing? Can you do sales? So I kind of started doing other jobs. And then the writing was on the wall. The company was going to have to close. So I moved to another company in Philadelphia, and I was commuting from New York to Philly. It was terrible. Missed my yoga practice, missed all of this. And then 9/11 happened, and my husband and I got engaged like right after that. And I was like, all right, screw this. I'm out of here. I'm not going to commute to Philly anymore. This is terrible. Yeah. I'm going to become a yoga teacher. And he's like, what are you even talking about? Like, what? I'm like, yeah, this is totally an amazing job. Like, it's going to be a great job as a mom. I can make my own hours. I was a dance teacher my whole life. Like this, just trust me. So he's like, all right. So I went to Florida. So I went down there for the whole month of January. I forget what year this was, 2002, I believe. And we got our 200-hour certifications. There's probably like 25 of us. And then I came back and I had quit my job. So then I was working as a coach head girl at the W Hotel part-time and then part-time ad sales recruiting at Time Inc. So some of my old recruiting friends were like, just come work part-time. That was a great gig. So I worked part-time doing both. I continued to do my 500-hour under Alan. And then slowly but surely started teaching more. My first class was a community class. I taught on this 19th Street and Broadway studio. It was like 1:00 on a Saturday. It was completely free, packed to the gills because it's a free community class. So that's where I started dipping my toe. Loved it. So I stopped, on my other side gigs and started just teaching full-time.
Why did you love it?
The first time I slept so well, the first time I ever practiced, I came home and was like, I just have never slept so well in my life. I was so chill. I was so relaxed because I'm definitely a type A person. I'm driven, motivated, moved to New York City from Nebraska, right? So that's my upbringing is like middle America and have always been kind of a go-getter. So this brought me down. It helped kind of balance everything out for me. And that I remember my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, saying, what do you like about this? I'm like, I don't know. I just feel great. Like I sleep great. My mood is better. Like I couldn't really put my finger on it, but I just felt great.
Yeah. And sort of having the hindsight now as someone who's been teaching all these years, just to hit on that a little bit more, why do you think people feel so good and sleep so well after doing yoga and establishing a yoga practice?
Great question. I think the yin and the yang of the energizing poses, like back bend sequencing, helps to bring fire to the body. It heats you up, it energizes you. But then at the same time, the calming and the cooling forward bending elicits that parasympathetic nervous system. So it like completely brings you back down. So the combination of the two, you feel energized, but then you're like, oh, but I'm so chill all at the same time. So for
Yeah.
me, a practice ebbs and flows between forward bending, back bending, twisting. Like you're moving. I also need to move. Like I do not put me on a spin bike. Like I feel claustrophobic. That would be my least favorite thing to do ever is going to a spin class. I love to move with the breath. So it just also the breath that energizes you. And so seldom do you breathe with intention. You know, you breathe to stay alive, but how often are you breathing with, a thought in mind or actually no thought in mind? Are you breathing with the movement and then creating those bookends, those spaces in between the thoughts that allow you to move up to that higher mind?
How did your teaching practice and path evolve, let's say the early 2000s?
Well, it's a great question. I remember Bev Murphy saying to me, everybody needs a hook. There's so many yoga teachers. What's your hook going to be? And I'm like, Jesus, I don't know. I never really found my hook until the last 7 years, probably. Like I just was a vinyasa teacher. I taught a ton of classes. I worked a lot. Like I would teach 6 a.m. privates and I'd finish my day at an 8 p.m. power class on the Upper West Side. So I was running up and down all over. And I just taught a really good flow class. But because I was a dancer, they were well sequenced, I think well choreographed, and a little more interesting than your traditional class from what my students have told me. But now I kind of feel like I found my hook. So that I've started teaching athletes. I've started teaching a lot of men, boys, girls too, but significantly have shifted more because of my own injuries, because of my kids' injuries. I've shifted more to strength-based and kind of athletic type of flow that is now I'm like, oh, I finally found my niche 22 years later.
How did you find that niche? And thinking about athletes, particularly men and male athletes, and trying to get them into yoga, like what gave you the clue to explore that path?
Well, I have 4 boys. So if I had 4 girls, this probably would be a completely different path. My oldest is 19, then I have 16, and I have twins that are 13. So when my oldest was in 7th grade, he started having a lot of injuries. He had 3 different stress fractures in his back.
In the 7th grade?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He had 7th grade, then 9th grade, and again in 10th grade. He had double knee surgery his 8th grade year. I had a hip replacement right around the same time. So between he and I, we were at the physical therapist office many days a week. And I'm a student. I'm a perpetual student. So I do deep dives. I drill, Kevin Cote is my complete, like the goat of all physical therapists. I pepper him with questions all the time. He's on speed dial. Like I'm always like, to be honest, I probably should have been a physical therapist instead of a yoga teacher, but now I weave the two together because I've done so much research on my own and my kids' injuries and have learned countless of, techniques and things that I can weave into my yoga practice and yoga teaching.
How does yoga help with injuries?
Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of yoga injuries as well. So too much of anything is going to get you injured. So I don't want to say that yoga, a lot of times people think it's a cure-all. Well, you can get yoga, injuries in yoga as well. So it definitely helps with mobility, especially in men. Their pelvises are generally tighter. The hip capsule, the way the femur bone sits into the acetabulum, if you think about that motion, it's very gritty and tough and tight. So we try to open the hips, which then in turn helps the low back, helps the hamstrings. So that I think, first and foremost, the mobility piece. And then what I now add a lot into is the strength piece. So I will teach a class, and instead of holding a high lunge, I will do like little pulses where you're actually engaging the glutes. And then I really try to instruct the students, we're doing this because of this. If you can't do this, similar to how we were discussing earlier about handstands, if you can't float up into a handstand against the wall easily, you need to figure, like, back off and do the scaffolding so you can get the building blocks to then get you up. So
Yep.
the balance of the strength and length for me is where it's at.
So 7, 8 years ago, you started to find this niche in working with athletes and men in it's sort of an underserved market, right? And what did you notice right out of the gates as far as how willing and receptive guys were? And then maybe let's consider guys of our generation who are not exposed to this stuff when they're younger, guys who are in their prime, let's just say the prime of their wisdom years or whatever you want to call it. What was the initial reaction for, let's say, men in our age group and their, call it, 30s, 40s, and 50s in getting introduced to yoga?
I think they're skeptical. I think they're embarrassed to go to a group class. I think their egos get in the way, to be honest. I think men like, oh, well, I can do that. Like, look at what else I can do in the gym. Like, as we know, it's completely different. So untraining that mindset is half the battle, not being shy about going into especially a hot yoga class. A lot of guys take their shirts off. Like, that's a special breed, But I think as you age, you can't do what you used to be able to do. That's just plain and simple. Like, I can't, I'm 50 years old now. I can teach how to do a lot of poses. I can't do them anymore. Like, I just don't have the range of motion, especially with my hip replacement now. It's pretty good. I can still do a lot of stuff, but I think men in general, as you start to age and, especially a lot of athletes that maybe were like high school athletes, that's not even college level athletes, they're strong. And then they're like, oh, of course I can do that. And all of a sudden they go to a yoga class. They're like, holy crap, I can't do any of this. Like,
yeah,
I didn't have the shoulder mobility for side planking. And they're like, jacking their shoulders up. They have a really hard time swallowing that they can't do certain stuff. It is completely different.
So what have you seen as guys have come into your classes, or whether you work with you in privates and that kind of thing? If you were to say there's like a typical path for how the guys get into yoga, you mentioned right out of the gates, their ego gets in the way. They're a little bit anxious about not performing well as far as being able to stay with the class. Like, what's the arc of how these guys transition from that place to actually getting something out of the practice?
I think being open-minded and then just showing up, like just coming to class regularly, becoming a regular practitioner and like checking your ego at the door. And then understanding when you walk into a room full of like-minded individuals, there's no way that's not going to rub off on you. So just showing up, like just going once a month is not going to get you there, right? I would recommend, especially to new practitioners, minimum once a week, ideally twice a week, and then take it from there.
Do you give a lot of cues to guys as far as modifications in certain poses so they don't feel like they have to do exactly the full pose and could do something that just works for them for that given moment?
Yeah, I think a skill of a good teacher is reading the room. I always look at kind of the bare minimum and who's struggling the most, whether it's male or female, old, young, and then developing the cues from there. I always give tons of modifications. And because I've been doing this so long, I'm blessed to be in a position that I can do that. Some of the newer teachers may not have that skill set yet, but it takes practice. It takes looking at the room, finding the least common denominator, and then building up from there.
Have you had a situation where you suggested a block or a wall or something for a guy to use and he sort of passed it off or chose not to use that support?
All of the time. Like every single class. So, and then, as a teacher, I repeat myself a few times, and then at a certain point, you're like, it's just not going to happen. But you do, like, sometimes if they're at risk for injury, I will just come over and be a complete, and just be like, no, you have to do this or you're going to blow out your shoulder. So do this now. They're like, oh, okay. But again, because I'm comfortable in my skin, I've been doing this for so long, I don't have a problem saying that. But some teachers might, like, they might be hesitant.
You can only spend so much time if you're managing a class of 10, 20 people to be able to, if that individual, that guy doesn't take the cue or the suggestion, you can't spend all day negotiating with him on why he should be putting that block under his hip or his knee or his hand. Have you seen men proactively get up and go get a block or a bolster or something because they actually have realized and learned that, like, I actually need something in this pose? Do you see, and which is kind of hard to do because nobody really wants to break the flow of the class and leave their mat to go do something. But I always find it encouraging when I see someone actually realize they have the agency themselves to say, I could use a block or I need to hold on to something.
It's a good question. I always tell the whole class, we don't start our class unless everyone has 2 blocks.
There you go.
Pretty much every time. I use my blocks as props often. So we'll start in a moving bridge on their backs and I'll have everyone put a block between their knees. So you at least have minimum 1. But I use them as props. I often have them hold the block between their hands with their palms so you get more protraction in the shoulder. So I use my blocks all the time. Bolsters and blankets, wedges, for instance, in Malasana and a deep squat, 90%, not 90, half of that class won't have their heels down on the floor correctly or the angles off with their knees. So we have these little thin wedges and I'll just dole them out to whomever I think needs them the most. I mean, we just don't have enough wedges for the whole class, but I'll, again, pick the lowest common denominator. If somebody is hung with their heels off the ground, and it's often men, right? And they're like, oh, and they're pretty gracious about it.
Tight calves,
tight ankles, and hips. It really comes from the hips. One thing I notice about men and the shift of going to the wall when you start doing inversions, that's where one time I did get myself into a little trouble. He was like probably a 250-pound guy, and I was supporting him in a handstand, and I always count to 3, and he kicked up while I wasn't ready and like almost broke my nose. It was terrible. But in general, I think because he was so anxious to get up and eager to get up, and like, oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna throw myself up into a handstand and like hit his leg in my face. But generally, I don't see a lot of resistance. Like if I bring someone a prop or if I think they need something, they are pretty willingly to take it.
Yeah. And I also think, for those who are listening, it gets to a certain point that you know what you need. If you happen to walk into a room and the instructor doesn't say, everyone grab a blanket and two blocks, usually if you're comfortable with using props to support yourself, you go get the 1 or 2 or 3 blocks that you need to support whatever you're doing. And for me, Supta Virasana, hero pose, lying back on the mat, great open body opener. To open up the hips, the back, it just feels great. There was a time I used to grab like 3 blocks just to support myself in that pose. Now I'm down to 2. At some point it'll be 1, but that's where this gets really interesting when you really know your body and you have a sense of confidence in the room where you know that your particular body may not be ready to do that particular pose and need a block or something. Or you actually just don't do that right now because you're still working through some things and you just wait to catch the next part of the sequence that the teacher's sharing, and you can say, okay, I'm going to jump back into this flow, or now I'm going to jump back in this thing. I know from my path and my experience, in the beginning, you're just trying to keep up with the room, assuming that everything that everyone else is doing is what I should be doing. And maybe your body should or could do that. But pretty soon, I think men and women realize, especially over the age of 40, when you're on this side of the pond, you start to realize what you need that day and what you don't need. And it becomes really empowering to really make the most of a great class, knowing that the teacher can't always look at, every student every minute.
Absolutely.
Then you're off and running because your home practice can be totally supported by the things that you need and the things you can work on. And I just feel like, I think props is one of the biggest, I would think hangups for guys to consider because, they probably see it as cheating. Back in my lacrosse days, facing off, if you weren't cheating, you weren't trying hard enough. Like everyone was cheating, You got
to hit the clamp.
You got the clamp and maybe you just happened to grab a stick accidentally and pick them off the ball or whatever it was. I feel now that you're really cheating in a yoga class, not using a block or a bolster or even a wall. Like find a place close to the wall, put your mat close to the wall so you know that if you've got a weak hip because of a torn labrum or you got an Achilles thing or you just want to put your hand on a wall, go find that space. Get there a little early and find that space. But you are really cheating yourself by not using some proper support because really where the opportunity to start knitting together those weak spots and building those fiber and that strength is not making that weak or injured spot in your body have to take on so much load. So reduce the load, put something under you, and then spend time knitting together your hip or your knee or whatever you're working on. And that's really, in my experience, has been where the most success has come is learning to work with your own nervous system and what you feel in your body. And then it really starts to build on that.
Yeah, I always say you are your own best teacher. So I can't tell you how you feel. And if you or if it's hurting and you can tell it's a pain response versus, maybe it's a hurt good versus hurt bad, that, I can't tell you that. So the props really allow everybody to find their perfect place to be in that day. And it may have been different from yesterday. It may be different from next week. How hydrated are you? How much sleep did you get last night? Like, what did you do for physical activity before or the day before?
Yep.
So there's a lot of variables that you really have to learn from within.
So I want to swing back, speaking of pain, I want to swing back to injuries again and just ask you this. How does yoga help somebody learn to avoid having an injury or creating an injury? And let's just say people do in yoga get injured from overuse in yoga or just doing something that they're not ready for. But in general, think about the athlete's mindset, the athlete's body out there. How do you think yoga helps athletes avoid having injuries?
So I often use the phrase do just enough because I think that translates to life. So many athletes push through, and I don't see this as much as at the college level, but the high school level, the mentality of high school coaches are sometimes very old school, even middle school. And they push through. You don't want to be a pussy. You don't want to be a wimp. You've got to push through, push through, push through. But if you're not listening to your own body and doing just enough, you will end up injured. So if we can teach that on the mat and in the classroom, and I tell this, I have a whole slew of middle school boys that I'm teaching right now, and they're at the perfect age because they're still pretty mobile, to be honest. A lot of them are just starting to dip the toe into the injuries, which is really unfortunate. Okay, for instance, perfect example. Yesterday, I taught a bunch of 5-year-olds, okay? And it was a Girl Scout badge honor something. So I taught them a hamstring stretch. They're like, ow, that hurts. Well, a 5-year-old instantly, it hurts. But a 7th grader is like, oh, that hurts. But I can tell the difference of like, this is actually a good hurt. So if they can understand that in their own bodies on the mat, then when they get to the field or court or whatever surface they're playing on, they can recognize, ooh, this is a bad hurt. This is a joint pain. This is a ligament pain, muscle pain. So then they start to dial it back, and like learning how to do just enough on the mat hopefully translates in real life.
Yep. Let me ask you this. How does yoga help people when you have an injury or you're recovering from, let's say, physical therapy? How does yoga help you actually knit those weak parts together?
Well, it's really important to work and know the contraindications. So if you are working with someone that does have an injury, like a hamstring tear, for instance, you really need to know. I did a lot of yoga therapeutic studying in the last 15, 20 years of how to do with specific injuries. So if you do have a hamstring tear, I'm not going to put somebody forward in a forward bend where you're stretching it at its length. I will have them put hands on blocks, bend that certain injured knee, and then isometrically drag the heel back. So you're actually gently stretching the muscle, but you're eccentrically pulling back and engaging the muscle. So it's really important as a teacher to know what the injury is. What have you been told by your doctor you can't do? So if you have a back issue and you can't go into a cobra or any sort of back bend, you need to learn the modifications and all of the above. So yoga, how they help most injuries is the movement with the breath. So seldom, I think I tapped on this earlier, you breathe to live. You don't breathe with intention. You don't breathe with awareness and learning how to, reduce the stress in the body. When you take 3 deep breaths, there's this physiological response. The cortisol levels of your stress responses drop. So stress instantly, goes down. The body will receive that message and then hopefully translate it into whatever your injured muscle is. So I have a kid right now that I'm working with. I'm actually seeing him right after this. He has had plantar fasciitis so badly that he's on the verge of surgery. He's had a PRP treatment. He has had stim. He's had a dry needling. He has had acupuncture. He has gone to physical therapy, chiropractic. Basically, I'm his last stop. So I'm working with he and his brother, both football players. And his dad said his feet have not felt this good since he started doing yoga twice a week. So yes, do I address the feet? Absolutely. But I really address the whole body and the whole posterior chain. So the fascia channel for him in particular is the foot, but the fascia chain from the foot goes all the way up the whole backside of the body to the crown. So the hamstrings, the upper back, the cervical, like that all connects. So we've been doing a whole body practice, and he's like, oh, my feet actually feel the least pain that they've felt in months. Like the poor kid, he's an athlete. He can't run. He's in that much pain. So There's something physiological that's happening inside that's making that better. The whole body.
I remember when I was first dealing with back injuries, maybe 10 years ago. And well, I was working with a massage therapist and she was a dancer. By the way, I'm blown away by how tough actually dancers are, how strong their bodies are, some of the crazy injuries that dancers have had to deal with.
Yeah.
And she got me into Pilates and she referred to me to somebody who was working at Pilates on Fifth. And that really was massive in helping me really learn how to engage the core.
I love Pilates. I think it's great.
The transverse abdominis muscle and just really learn how to crank on that. And that stabilized a lot of my L5S1, back issues. And I would say the core in itself is a whole universe of learning how to activate the various different muscles within the core. The reason why I bring this up was she, the massage therapist who was a dancer who had her own injuries, she was like, it's all connected. Oh, it's all connected. All your injuries are, your whole body is
Right.
dealing with this. And I had a tough time like realizing and feeling and connecting that whatever's messing you up in the hip is probably, across the body affecting, if it's your right hip, it's affecting many locations and issues in your body that you wouldn't even think are, anywhere in the neighborhood. And when you find the ability to tap into your nervous system and learn how to feel, like just learning how to feel where you're stuck, where you're not stuck, where to create heat. I have so many so much asymmetry in my body that I kind of use the strong side to teach the weak side. And it goes both ways. And I think you can really learn to mend yourself by learning how to feel the feel. And it sounds like this football player you're working with, he's learned how to strengthen parts of his body to take some of the trauma off the plantar fasciitis, reducing that inflammation. It's hard sometimes to go into it, even though physical therapy is fantastic and it's important. It sometimes seems like it has a very myopic view on how you treat the body. And in no ways am I saying people should skip physical therapy and solely do other things like yoga. But I think yoga complements a lot of the very hyper-focused exercises you do in physical therapy and can really learn how to move and feel in your body in a way that does help you out.
I try to infuse, you touched on Pilates. I infuse a lot of Pilates into my classes, and I infuse a lot of the PT movements that myself or my kids have learned over the years, because most people, these are the same recurring injuries, that a lot of people have the same stuff, but a lot of the same exercises address the same stuff. So, the hip strengthening, the glute strengthening, the core strengthening is all, especially for men. Most men, like I work with these football players, the whole football team, there's like 90 of them. And we do boat pose and they're shaking like a leaf. And I'm like, you guys can bench 300 pounds, but you can't do boat pose? Like what? So that is like huge. If we just lessened, granted, it depends on the position, but that to me is the first and foremost. Strengthen your core, go start at the core center and then move out. So, and the fascia that for this poor kid, if you think of if you have a wad of Twizzlers and each Twizzler represents a muscle or a ligament, and if each Twizzler is wrapped in saran wrap, the saran wrap is the fascia. So it's literally, it goes into everything. And now doctors actually, thank God, are now addressing a lot of fascia issues. Even medical professionals, usually it's more chiropractors and massage therapists always knew about fascia, but like orthopedic surgeons, they're starting to actually like, oh, this is something real here. We maybe should address this. So, but yoga helps lengthen the fascia. It gets breath, prana, life force into the fascia.
Moves fluids, blood flow, gets the neurons firing. It is legit. So what have you noticed about working with men our age versus these younger guys at the middle school and high school level in their ability to do yoga and maybe understanding the whole body kind of connection?
Well, I have one scenario. I was teaching a couple years ago. I was teaching a bunch of high school kids, and one dad was like, "He doesn't need that. What does he need that for?" And I'm like, "Okay." And I didn't say anything. Just was like, nodding to myself. And so I don't have. I at my group classes at the yoga studio that I teach for, Kaya, I'll have a handful of men that come to classes, but in general, there's not a huge population of 40 plus men coming to classes. But to your point, the dads are the kids are well beyond where the dads would ever be with teaching yoga. I don't teach a lot of adult males. Like I'll have an occasional guy come to me and then he won't call for 6 months. Like guys are just, in the 40 plus range. They get busy. They don't put it as a priority. And then he'll call me back and be like, oh my God, can you see me 3 times a week for the next 3 weeks? But then he'll fall off the face of the earth again. They don't make it a priority. It's not like a systematic routine for them at all. Whereas I think the kids, the youth, like they'll reach out to me. I'll get texts from the kids, high school kids, college kids. Hey, can you meet with me today? Like their parents obviously have given them free reign. I have to now, the middle school boys classes that I'm teaching are so busy. I can only accommodate a certain number of mats in my home studio that I have to not include everybody. Like they obviously see the benefit.
On that, actually, what do you think the benefits these younger guys are seeing?
I teach straight up yoga, but I also weave in, I'll bring in bands. I bring in some light props like the little Pilates balls. So we do some hip flexor strengthening stuff that would be specific for speed. And I'll tell them, we're doing this because this is your first step. This is going to get you faster. So the minute I speak to them in like athletic terms, then we'll do a lot of twisting. This opens your T-spine. What do you need T-spine mobility for? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, your shot velocity comes from your thoracic mobility. They're like, oh yeah, okay, let's do that. So I try to really put it into like very simple terms that they're going to be like, oh, I'm doing this because of this. Hips, where does the power from your shot come? Or most things, your hips, your hip strength. So I think I just watched my little middle school team play this morning and they crushed. So I definitely think that there's something that's going on here that's great. It's like a revolution. It's like an underground revolution. All these kids now, they just happen to be friends with my kids themselves. But I hope that, it gets out into the rest of the world.
Yeah. So it is great to see that they're getting into this stuff. And I think it's an absolute no-brainer how it can really help you have great mobility and stability across your body. I wish when I was in high school, I had this for lacrosse and for hockey and just learning how to do a strong core. I mean, back then it was like literally all crunches, like just crunches.
And it's it doesn't address the back at all.
Exactly. And so, it's awesome that they're getting into that. Do you see, because clearly, we grew up in the 70s and 80s, there was only a handful of TV channels. There was no internet. Mm-hmm. These guys now are living in a totally different world. They're constantly connected and plugged in. You think some of them are getting any benefit from yoga to learning how to sort of disconnect and reconnect in their bodies and deal with their own stress? You think are they there yet?
I just watched this special on 60 Minutes about rewiring the mind and how basically since 2010, our youth have been completely screwed since the iPhone came out. And now there's a big movement to going back towards flip phones, which I am all in favor of. I wish that I would never have gotten my kids iPhones. Maybe a little, they don't get to be on their phones for an hour during yoga class. So that's good. So at least an hour a day, I know that they're not, connected. But on the flip side, I get a lot of information on Instagram of people that I follow with very useful information that I send to my kids. So there's the good and the bad with it. But this particular group of boys that I'm thinking of, they're on their phones, but they're a collective unit. They're like always socializing and out with each other. So they might be a little bit of an anomaly these days, because I think most people are more heads in their phones all the time. I'd like to say yes. I don't know if we're there yet, to be truthful.
So for those who want to work with Casey, tell us a little bit about where you do your teaching, your instruction, the types of athletes and students you like to work with. Where can people find you?
So my handle for Instagram is Casey McBride Yoga, and I teach at Kaya Yoga, both New Canaan and Darien locally. And then I have a home studio. It's a small space. I can't, host a large number of people, but I do have people that come to me. But then I also will often go to people's homes as well. I've been doing that for 23 years now. So that's, a little bit of everything, a smorgasbord.
That's great. Hey, Casey, listen, it was worth the wait. It's so great to finally get you on the show here. I love what you're doing with the niche of working with more men and more athletes and more younger guys. I think it's awesome. And I think it's, way overdue for those age groups and those segments to get into yoga. And anyhow, thanks for sharing a little bit about your path and your story and what you're doing.
Thanks for having me. Good luck.
All right. Thanks, Casey. Well, that was a great conversation. Listen, if you are in the New York area, in the Connecticut area, and you've got a younger person in your family, maybe it's a guy, maybe it's a young guy, middle schooler, high schooler, Casey has a lot of experience having 4 boys working with young student athletes. And I highly recommend you reach out to her and either work with her on setting up a private for someone in your family or some of the various classes she teaches. And hey, if you're a coach who runs a team, track her down. I think it's a great opportunity to get more yoga teachers working with high school athletes to not only complement their fitness routines, but also help to avoid injuries as well. And make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. By the way, we just relaunched the website, GTY Podcast. There's some great information up there about books that I recommend, products that I recommend, a number of teachers we've had on. And hopefully it's a resource that gives you guys some opportunity to explore your own practice with. We're going to be launching a newsletter at some point, so feel free to drop in your email address if you're interested in hearing some information, probably on a monthly basis starting later this year. And follow us on Instagram, GTY Podcast on Instagram. And if you've got a great story about how you got into yoga, or you know some guy out there who has a great story, drop us a note on the website. There's a link to forms that we can send you to upload your story. Anyhow, thanks for listening. Until the next time.